We're going to make a start, everybody. So it's my absolute pleasure to invite you into, I don't know what number session this is. It should be session number 10. No, not 10, 11, with a couple of very amazing, wonderful friends of mine, Art Bochner and Carolyn Ellis, who join us from Florida. And welcome to Carolyn and Art, and welcome to all of you who are online. And it's really special that you can join us. For whatever reason you can't be here, we know it's impossible to be everywhere, but it's really special that you're here, and you really make the conference, for me, I don't know about the rest of you, but gives it a really different feel when we think of there's people joining us, well, they've got caregiving responsibilities, relatives who are ill, they can't travel, and they're here with us experiencing this. So it's really special that you've made the effort to be here. So this session came about through a conversation I think Carolyn and Art and I were having, and it developed over a number of weeks and backwards and forwards with each other's writing, and in particular a piece that Carolyn sent me that reminded me to include and think about joy and wonder and those types of moments and how important they are to our scholarship. And so, Carolyn, if I can ask you to lead us away on this presentation and panel. So thanks very much. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. And it's just an honor to be here with you, all of you, even if it has to be on a screen. I wish I were there, except I'm not sure I want to be in the heat, but I wish I were there anyway. And Kitrina, you're just amazing at what you are able to organize. So my presentation is called Living in a Feeling World of Joy, Hope, and the Ordinary. I want to be cremated, my sister Judy says, and I want my ashes spread in a stream near where we grew up in Luray. Okay, I say, but you will have to tell me where the stream is located. She does. Then, I don't want a funeral and a casket, she continues. That's too sad. I want a memorial service at Mom's church in Virginia, like the one we had for our brother. I'll choose the music. You could speak and tell stories about me like you did for him. And maybe there could even be a gathering at our home in Mississippi, too. Okay. And no big dinners, she adds. Too much trouble. I want an ice cream social. Everyone in our family loves ice cream, and that's easy. Maybe you could organize it. Well, I'd have to figure out what kind of ice cream to get and how to keep it from melting. Oh, no, you wouldn't, she laughs. We'd all bring our favorite kind. Look at me saying we as though I'll be looking down from above telling you what to do. Well, maybe you will. I laugh with her. But just in case, make sure to write all those instructions down for me. In this excerpt, my sister is near death. Yet in the phone conversations we have daily, we are both fully present as we feel the depth of our shared love. We laugh, we love. Reading what I wrote about her brings joy to Judy. For me, the attention I pay is a gift, the chance to do something with and for her while learning how to love without holding back, especially at the end of life. This autoethnographic story was focused on grief and loss. Yet, when I looked back at it, what stood out for me was not the grief, but the joy woven through these ordinary conversations. That realization led me to ask whether autoethnography has focused too much on suffering, disruption, and epiphany, while overlooking the quiet ways joy appears in everyday life. As I reread stories from my childhood, from my sister's final months, and even about our current political moment, I found that suffering was present, but it was carried within ordinary life, where joy still found room to emerge. That discovery led me to write an article about what I call the feeling world, the sensory and emotional texture of everyday life, remembered in small details, subtle moods, and embodied experience, where joy and pain coexist and shape one another. Paying attention to this feeling world, I suggest, means attending to life in its fullness, not only suffering, but also joy, not only the extraordinary, but also the ordinary. I turn now to the conclusions in that paper. The larger political world I wrote about and actually presented at this conference last year continues to interrupt and press against the boundaries of my life. And yet, as in childhood and as in my conversations with Judy, daily life continues. My partner and I care for our dogs. We tend to friendships. We talk, we walk, we cook, we read, we write, we play, we watch TV. These routines do not erase the overwhelming political context, but they do provide a way of living within it. We return again and again to the feeling world of our lives, the shared spaces of care, kindness, touch, deep conversation, and attention. We enjoy and feel love for chosen family, friends, and each other. At night, Art and I curl together, the dogs sighing peacefully in the bends of our knees. We breathe freely on our walks through woods and parks, express awe at the beauty of sunsets, enjoy the taste and sensuousness of food, notice every new bloom in our flower gardens, and engage fully in new ideas in our writing and reading. We text voters and place please vote hang tags on doors and are invigorated by participating in local political rallies. These moments of joy, small, ordinary, relational, are not trivial. They do not erase political turmoil, but they sustain us within it. The quiet joy can become a form of resistance. And when still the sense of instability and dread threatens to take me over, I turn to autoethnography as a way into and through the trauma, as a hopeful path to meaning and survival. I turn to autoethnography as a practice of hope. To live autoethnographically is to attend carefully to experience, moments, relationships, conversation, and feelings as meaningful in themselves and as windows into the cultural world we inhabit. It is to remain present to uncertainty, to question what we think we know, and to dwell in the messiness of lived experience. Autoethnography also offers companionship. By telling and sharing stories, we come to understand our own lives more fully while inviting others into that process. We become compassionate witnesses to our lives and to what unfolds around us. With a human touch, we engage people where they live, opening possibilities for dialogue, recognition, and transformation. In this way, personal troubles are translated into a broader social consciousness, one story at a time. An autoethnographic life asks us to remain present, to despair without being consumed by it, to notice joy when it appears, and to keep returning to the work of understanding and caring and imagining more humane futures. Viktor Frankl reminds us that those who survived the Holocaust often sustain themselves by imagining futures that gave their lives meaning and purpose. Similarly, Mark Freeman makes the case that hope becomes more urgent in times of despair. When we believe nothing can change, we relinquish responsibility for acting. Hope, by contrast, keeps us ethically engaged. It arises from our capacity to imagine futures that have not yet arrived. Without that imaginative reach, moral action and social change become difficult. Hope, then, is the refusal to let despair determine the future. Looking back, I see that the ordinary has sustained me across very different chapters of my life. In my childhood, everyday sensory life formed a context in which trauma existed but did not define the whole. In my conversations with Judy, small daily exchanges become a way of living fully in the presence of death. And in our current political moment, the routines of daily life may not offer escape from the world, but they do put forward a way of remaining present in it. These mundane moments play a central role in life as lived. They hold us, steady us, and sometimes restore us. They are where joy emerges, not as a grand and lasting state, but as something relational, embodied, and often fleeting. These moments also make space for hope. Hope is something we practice through attention, through relationship, through the stories we tell and the ways we choose to live. My hope is that through autoethnography, we might move ourselves and others to feel and care more fully and to remain engaged with the world, especially in difficult times. So, what do we as autoethnographers do now? We continue. We attend to small moments. We listen. We tell our stories. We act where we can. We remain open to joy, especially when it appears amidst pain. We take to heart Leonard Cohen's words, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Peering into the cracks, we look for the light, however dim. We follow it. We write toward it. In the process, we discover that the light is not only before us, but also within us. We let this little light shine. Sustained by Ernest Becker's insight that the most that any of us can seem to do is to fashion something, an object or ourselves, and drop it into the confusion, make an offering of it to the life force. This presentation, as imperfect as it is my offering to you. Thank you. There we are.
Thank you, Caroline. Art, did you want me to go next? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
So there'll be time for some reflections and conversation with Art and Caroline at the end of the three pieces. Meditations on joy and wonder. In the work and research David and I have been involved with over the past 25 years, one recurring theme has been to notice and to try to become aware of what's missing. Most times it's what is missing from the literature that we focus on, but also we try and find out what is missing because of the methods that we use, missing because people can't find ways to communicate their experience, and because we are blunt tools in the process of amplifying trauma, abuse, and grief. But I'm also aware and have been reflecting on what we miss about ourselves and how we learn and have wonderful aha moments that, well, some can be painful, but can also bring a flood of awe, wonder, and sometimes joy. So in this presentation, I'd like to share two such moments. 1st of October 2013, Moving in Circles. The filmmaking course didn't devote much time to editing, but I'd picked up the basics. I opened my laptop, created a new project in iMovie, typed in The Long Run, and selected a black background for the title. Moving the cursor, I selected the voice recording and then dragged the audio file we recorded 3 years earlier into the project plane. Then I began selecting images from the footage we shot at another time, just playing and experimenting. Some images seemed to fit the mood. There was the beach on a wild day and some shots of David running through the dunes. I was exploring options, trying to be aware of my emotional responses to these options, to these images and sounds, and allowing them to connect with some internal barometer. After an hour or so, I became aware I'd stopped and was just staring blankly at the screen. Something was missing. I couldn't articulate what. I'd become lost in my inner world, and now there was a slow dawning about the absent thing. For almost the whole of our PhDs, we were writing and sharing songs, playing music. David even recorded a whole album. And these songs had created a soundscape, a sonic message that now was yelling to be included. I wandered over to the bookcase, selected an album called Welcome to the Sun, slipped the disc into the computer and transferred all 11 songs onto the hard drive. Then I dragged one of them, moving in circles, to the project plane and hit play and full screen. Immediately, the images and sounds combined in a deeply moving and poignant way. That's it. On one level, I was engaged with the open images, an ambulance, the ceiling of a hospital, as you would see it if you were on a gurney, a tree blowing in the wind in black and white with the mental health conditions and a sign saying 1 in 4. 1 in 4 of us are likely to have a mental episode, a mental health condition. These provided the essential backstory, but beneath it, providing the emotional wallop, a soulful finger-picked guitar and David's voice and the song he'd written and recorded back in 2003. If I took this heartache and planted it this evening, would there tomorrow be something warm and strong and free? 'Cause I'm thinking of trading in everything that's broken and maybe dreaming long enough that you'd eventually see. Two, practice. I was at a relative's birthday party, a little bored if I'm honest, but attempting to be gracious, help out, and happy to be there for those reasons. A member of the Long Ashton Golf Club, someone who was distinguished, well-respected, wealthy, came over and helped himself to some punch. Then he launched into something I had not the tools or resources to respond to at the time, but I needed to keep peace. This wasn't my gig. I always felt sad for you, he said. In a way, I felt he was being superior. Out there in all winds and weathers, just bashing balls all day. What an awful way to earn a living. Such a sad life you have. Wow. What I couldn't say to him at the time, I can say in a story now. The warm bed wasn't alluring enough, and though pleasant and comforting, she drew herself from the soft sheets and pulled on a pair of shorts, a t-shirt, socks, trainers, and headed for the car. Minutes later, she pulled up by the field and was emptying a bag of white balls onto the tanned grass. The sun hadn't long been up, and its orange light made the practice ground appear magical. She loved these moments. Cool air on her skin, an orange and red sky, hidden pockets of warm air, a musky aroma driving from the grass. She squeezed each shot and it fizzed as it went through the stillness, but hardly made a sound as it settled on the ground near the white post she was aiming at, about 70 yards away. And it was always exactly 70 yards away to start with. Her grouping of white balls around the post suggested that she was no normal player. In fact, if you didn't know better, you'd swear she'd put the balls around the post to begin with, rather than hitting them from the length of a football pitch away. Her next shot was so accurate, it pitched fully on the 3-inch wide post and ricocheted off, making a loud crack. It was the only sound in the still morning air. Something further up the field was moving, stopped with that sound. And that stopping of that movement drew her attention. 3 deer had been passing. Now they watched her, motionless. Statuettes in the sun's spotlight. She stared back, not moving, not breathing, aware of slender legs, long bodies, a dignified and dainty presence in her mourning. The lead deer turned its head from her to draw in the morning through its nostrils. Then with its nose it swept the dewy grass. Raising its head again, something drew it back on its journey and it walked on. The other deer looked from her to the larger deer, breathed in a message perhaps hidden in the morning air, and just followed on. Her body went back to hitting, but her mind was filled with words. They arrived as silently and as unexpectedly as the deer. They filled her head with joy, as had the deer. Like the deer, they would not move. It was a fountain bursting out. So she emptied the words on a piece of paper. The only paper she could find was on a yardage book stuffed in her golf bag, but the lines came flooding out. As she wandered off to collect her ball, she hummed, allowing the words to drop into her melody, and out popped a ditty. She wouldn't be so grandiose to call it a song, but she sang it just the same, maybe to herself, maybe to the deer, or maybe to remind her of that moment with the deer. These moments remind me of how we can reclaim precious moments of awe and wonder in a world that thinks we are engaged, especially in academia, with outputs, outcomes, REF submissions, and impact factors. It reminds me of something within that is precious and needs marking and needs protection, nurturing in myself and possibly you all too. Thank you. So Art, over to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
you're
an
on.
honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I want to talk today about the audacity of autoethnography. In the winter of 1991, as my collaboration with Carolyn Ellis began to take shape, I found myself both agitated and inspired by the unease I felt about the direction of the social sciences. Something vital was missing. The image of the human being had been reduced in the name of science, made visible, condensed into an object of analysis, but not fully alive. I had come to realize that the social sciences into which I had been socialized in the 1970s and 80s had inherited something akin to the creature science described by Ernest Becker, a science detached from the existential dramas of a self-reflective being obliged to create meaning while living in full awareness of its mortality. Research publications in our scholarly journals were methodical and competent, but they were rarely touching, seldom inspirational, and hardly ever urgent. At age 45, though already a full professor, I was yearning for a change. Given my excellent training as a positivist, publishing had come relatively easy. At first, my research had felt challenging, but now I was bored. I didn't consider what I was doing worthwhile. I had lost interest and inspiration. For 10 years, I had been my department's senior methodologist, teaching research design, advanced statistics, and mentoring PhD students. But I also had lived through a severely traumatic experience that had, in a manner of speaking, taken my breath away, jolted my frames of reference, and revealing life's impermanence. Suddenly, the notion of spending endless hours formulating testable hypotheses, designing rigorous experiments, or composing surveys felt meaningless. For most of the 1980s, I had been deeply immersed in the writings of Clifford Geertz, Jules Henry, Charles Taylor, Richard Rorty. What I once took for granted, I now questioned and doubted. The isolation and separation of disciplines, the privileging of objectivity and method, and the marginalization of forms of understanding grounded in experience, intuition, and affect. That seemed destined to change. But how? How could we open a space for a more poignant, vulnerable, and truly human science, a resonant science that would conceive its subject as a self-aware animal grappling with meaning and mortality? Our work would need to matter not only intellectually, but also viscerally. We imagined a form of research that could move, unsettle, and change people, including ourselves. I can't honestly say that we imagined it this way at the time, but retrospectively, I can now see how audacious we were going to have to be. It was going to be necessary to throw caution to the wind. In our very first joint presentation in 1991, Carolyn and I asked the conveners of the conference to schedule our session in an auditorium with a stage. We said little in advance about our presentation, only that it would be more like a performance than a talk, that we wanted to speak last and we would need more time than usual, about 20 to 25 minutes. The program chair could have said, "Why, you certainly have a lot of gall." But she didn't. She allowed us to proceed despite our shameless disregard for the rules and decorum of academic meetings. Our performance dialogically enacted several deeply personal scenes from our intimate relationship, a troubled experience that might have ended us as a couple had we not been willing to give voice to an experience normally shrouded in secrecy. It was a story we told as much for ourselves as for the others in the audience. When we disclosed the story of that performance in our very first joint publication, we said we had been experimenting with a mode of inquiry that operates reflexively to reveal ourselves to ourselves with the hope and in the spirit of inviting others into our story in a visceral way that could enable them to know themselves better by holding together the emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and moral dimensions of lived experience rather than separating them. Our performance was thus intended to be viewed as an experience of an experience from which we and those entering our story could inquire into its possible meanings and values without fixing them once and for all. At the time, this was an audacious experiment, a tentative step in forming what would later be called autoethnography, as a mode of inquiry that should be judged not so much against the standards and practices of science as against the practical, emotional, and aesthetic demands of life. The trauma through which we had lived and subsequently narrated had taught us something about what it means to be alive, and we now had a notion of what we would strive to become as writers and ethnographers. There were quite a few people, though not everyone, in the room that day who thought we had lost our minds. And more of them emerged when we published our first book together in 1996, Composing Ethnography. They were looking for objectivity, detachment, variables, hypotheses, and researchers who stood apart from their texts. Autoethnography gave them something else entirely. First, autoethnography gave them the audacity of uncertainty and doubt. We rejected the idea of a higher realm of conceptual, analytical, and predictive life that takes precedence over sensory, material, corporeal, and practical life. Postmodernism had pulled back the curtain, revealing that the emperor of objectivity had no clothes, shifting attention away from how accounts of lived experience correspond to reality and toward what they enable people to see, say, feel, and do. After all, where there are no sentences, there is no truth. Autoethnography was to succeed not by corresponding more accurately to reality, but by offering redescriptions in the form of narratives that make new forms of experience visible, meaningful, and evocative. The lives we humans live exceed the capacity of an empiricist language of objectivity, detachment, and distance to grapple with them. Autoethnography provided a new vocabulary, a language that conceived human beings as self-interpreting animals and directed attention to narrative and performative practices that can make lived experiences intelligible by placing them within particular evocative and self-reflexive frameworks. Second, autoethnography gave them the audacity of the I. Autoethnography refused to exclude the I, not because our lives are inherently interesting or important, but because every inquiry begins somewhere with someone. I cannot remove myself from what I know. It would no longer be acceptable to pretend I am nowhere. I would now bear the responsibility to examine how my presence shapes what I take as knowable. This is not self-indulgence. This is intellectual honesty. Autoethnography's audacity was not that it said I, it was that the I refused to be the last word. Third, autoethnography gave them the audacity of good. even beautiful or poetic prose. For more than a century, academic prose in the social sciences wore its ugliness as a badge of rigor. Autoethnography offered the radical idea that writing itself was inquiry. We chose story over theory because we wanted readers to enter into lived experiences appealing to their hearts and senses as well as their intellects. Fourth, autoethnography gave them the audacity of vulnerability as a risky but beneficial way to enter into the deep ocean of serious social, emotional, and existentially precarious lived experiences, grief, loss, illness, love, caring, hope in the face of extinction. Autoethnography conceived of vulnerability not as weakness, but as a source of knowledge. A vulnerable narrator who breaks your heart can also open avenues of hope and optimism, because working through and surviving sorrow and suffering shows people engaged in the process of creating and moving meanings, the most fundamental of human activities. Fifth, autoethnography gave them the audacity of triadic transformation, the hope that changing the way we speak and what we speak can transform ourselves, our readers, and the very idea of scholarship itself. The most profound audacity of autoethnography is not writing about ourselves, but allowing ourselves to be different because we have written. That is where we started in the 1990s. But now, more than 30 years later, at age 80, I find myself thinking about audacity differently. I think of audacity these days like many other writers I've known who are aware that the road ahead is shorter than the road behind. I now think of audacity as a form of understanding that a single life, my life, your life, all lives remain unfinished. I used to think audacity meant finding my voice. Now I believe it means striving to cultivate my ears and remaining open to experience. I understand autoethnography now not mainly as an act of self-expression, but as an ethics of receptivity, a willingness, even eagerness to be addressed by experience, by loved ones, by readers, by students, by memory, by loss, by grief, and by writing itself. You see, the deepest audacity of autoethnography is not writing about ourselves, but allowing ourselves to be different because we have written. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Beautiful
Sorry
piece.
about that.
You're allowed to overrun, Art. That's quite all right. It's really lovely to hear you both speak. We've got about 10 minutes, everybody. I'm sure that there are lots of reflections and conversations we would like to have. There's never long enough, however long we have. But maybe if you wanted to raise a couple of issues or a reflection, just put your hand up and I will let you have a microphone. And the same for you guys online. If you put your hand up, if I don't see it, somebody will shout out and you can please speak. Yes. Can you check my pen?
Kitrina, Caroline, thanks. They were great presentations. I think what you said about what was happening in 1991 is fantastic. I remember the aridity of social sciences at that time as well, because I was nearly as old as you. I think what ethnography did then was fantastic. It was revolutionary. I think now autoethnography is facing up to a whole different range of theorizings, loosely called post-human, materialist, whatever, relational, and so on. And I feel not that that challenge negates the quality of autoethnography that's been developing mainly through your instance and Norm Denson and others. But there's a challenge there, and I'm wondering how you think, shall I say, we as autoethnographers can now deal with what post-human forms of theorizing, people like Manning, Masumi, et al. Are offering, because they're offering something that's radically different. But I think at the same time, there are alliances that can be made, there are alongsidenesses that can be made, and I'd be interested to know what Art, Caroline, and Kitrina could say about that.
I'll start you, Carolyn.
Right.
I'll defer you.
Caroline, I'll hand over to you. What would you like to say about that?
Well, I will say that I remember listening to Ken's keynote. Was it last year or the year before? Whenever his keynote was at your, oh yeah, we can hear me. And feeling that we had so much in common, and feeling a kindred spirit with, you know, your ideas and thoughts. And certainly I'm always, I like to think that my autoethnography includes more than the human world. It always includes the dog world, but also all of nature that we get so much out of. So I think we have a lot to learn from you and from this way of looking at the world, and I hope that we are all thinking of ourselves as together and a kindred spirits.
Yeah, I would just say briefly that in 1990, there was the realization that many of us had that the social sciences were not really human sciences. Things were always evolving and changing. And what we've come to realize, and you've been contributing to this as many others here have as well, is that the human is connected beyond the human. And the pressure we feel today is to recognize that and to build a system work that shows what we need to be looking at. And I think that's what's happening. So I'm optimistic about that.
Thank you. We'll leave that there. We can pick it up later at the pub. Yes. Do you want to come and get the microphone? I'm hanging onto my laptop. Okay, thanks. So if you just say your name so that people online can.
Hi, Anne Delkin from New York. I was just thinking about the role of the storyteller in general, and the fact that, you know, when you're growing up and you read, I don't know, Peter Pan, and you've got Wendy there, sort of the middle of the story, or you read Little Women and you've got Jo, you know, who's an incredibly powerful person because of her storytelling, and how the most horrible thing in the book that can happen is that her stories got burned, for instance, you know. Or if you read Rushdie's Haroun and the Sea of Stories, the role of the storyteller is so central to society. And it seems to me that with, you know, this growing interest in this way of conveying information, in this way of connecting and sharing, I think we're returning to that, giving preeminence to the storyteller as someone to whom you would turn and someone from whom you would learn. And I think that's really important.
Thanks. Yeah, do you want to ask?
Since it was right here. This is Luke Anderson. Always a privilege to hear all of you speak so beautifully and eloquently. So thank you for your words. I wanted to ask about Carolyn's part of the presentation. I really appreciate the challenge of being pushed toward thinking about hope and joy moments and not just moments of pain and suffering. And that's really pushed me to think about the work that I have done and the role that those two have played in the work that I have done and where that might mean I should go in the future. And so my question is, why do you think that we have placed such primacy on the pain and the sorrow? Is it because it's more evocative and elicits more of a response? Or like, why have we forgotten about hope and joy comparatively overall as autoethnographers?
Mm. Well, I think you're certainly right that it is more evocative, it's more dramatic. It's in some ways easier to write that in an evocative, engaged way than to write about joy or happiness. But I also think a big part of it is that we are pulled to write about things that are disturbing us, that we want to get over, and we see autoethnography as a potential way of getting over it. And when we are in happiness or joy, we just want to stay there and experience it. You know, we're not moved in the same way to write through it, to try to solve something. There's not something to solve. And I think especially now, with the world in such political crisis, especially occurring in the United States, there is this pull and push toward, how do we have hope in this kind of environment? How do you live joyfully without guilt, in spite of all of the sadness in the world? And is it okay to do that? So I think these have become topics that we really feel a need to explore for our own well-being at this point. And so I see it coming from different places, the emphasis on hope and joy and the ordinary in life as opposed to the just the extraordinary.
Thanks, Carolyn. Has there anyone else some comments or reflections? Neil?
So you get your step counted.
Thank you. My name is Neil, and it's not a question, it's just a reflection. I've been swimming in your collective writing, the three of you, for the last 8 or 9 years. And for some reason, I had different voices in my head. The work of all three of you, and just hearing that performance in your voice, but also your writing voice, it has set my brain on fire in the best way possible. And I can't wait to get back to my room to just go read some of your lessons and things. So just want to say thank you. That's been a real joy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's funny, I can remember that,
Yes.
reading the Handbook of Qualitative Inquiry. And I used to put Laurel Richardson in conversation with Carolyn and Art, and they'd be at the bottom of my bed having these conversations for me from their work. Creative way to take on writing. Has anybody else would like to share a thought or reflection from that? Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so this is an imperfect meditation on connection. From time to time, raising my eyes towards something like a loose lock of blue string that could become a telephone line if we turned into kids playing with 2 plastic cups. I'm listening in, not alone anymore, yet there's a wall between us that you can only feel through with your hands. An electric zap, unsustainable, except for the moments when it becomes a static hum, like now, from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to draw the session to a close. We've got 5 minutes before we have our keynote. So thank you guys for pitching up in your Florida morning and contributing to our conference so eloquently, and wonderful, wonderful. And thank you very much. So from all of us. It's a pleasure to have you among us. And for those of you that are here, we'll just have a 5-minute stretch your legs and a breather before we go on to the keynotes. So, and the same for you guys online. Stand up and move around.